Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. I've just bought myself 300 Dubia Roaches, and in today's video I plan on educating you on exactly how you can care for Dubia Roaches, but also how to encourage them to breed rapidly. So by the end of this video, you will be able to care for Dubia Roaches, but also create a self-sustaining colony to be able to feed off to your pet reptiles. So let's begin the video. So to begin with, breeding Dubia Roaches is a lot easier than you probably realise. Providing that you follow what I do within this video, you should have your Dubia Roaches breeding in no time. Dubia Roaches are extremely robust, and they are an extremely nutritional food source for your pet reptiles. So to begin with, you're going to need to get yourself something to actually house your roaches in. So personally, I would recommend getting yourself a tall black container. Now, the reason why I would recommend a black container over a clear container, let's say, is because Dubia Roaches prefer living in the dark. And in fact, it actually helps encourage them breed quicker. So this is why I'd recommend getting yourself a black container and just make sure that it's got somewhat height to it. Now, in this video, I'm going to actually be using this container. This is just a clear container, and the reason why I'm going to use this is so then you can actually see inside it a lot better for whilst I film this video. But once this video is done, I'll basically take everything out of this, put it into a black container. I just want you to be able to see everything that's going on. So once you have your container, the next thing that you're going to need to think about is ventilation. Now, ventilation is an extremely key aspect to housing your Dubia Roaches. You need to ensure that they have adequate ventilation or airflow. So in order to provide ventilation, what I'd recommend doing is simply get your container and drill loads of holes around the top edge of the container. Alternatively, you could also cut a square in the middle of your container lid and then add some mesh to the top of that. And this would also work great for ventilation for your Dubia Roaches. And by adding ventilation, you're going to basically help prevent your roaches from dying off. So once you've actually drilled your holes or you've added the ventilation to the top of the lid, you're pretty much ready to go. Now, Dubia Roaches usually take about 3 to 5 months to go from a baby to a fully grown adult, which means that they grow fairly quickly. Now, female roaches can start laying eggs 2 months after reaching maturity. And when they lay their eggs, they usually lay between 180 to 200 eggs per year per female. Now, to tell the difference between a male and female, females have these small wings like this one on the screen, and the males have a lot larger wings. So in order to get your colony off the ground and thriving, it's important that you start with at least 50 females. And when you start your colony, I'd recommend getting yourself the 50 females and basically do a ratio of 3 to 1. So in this case, it's going to be 3 females to 1 male. So if you've got 50 females, you're going to need about 15 males. Now, when starting your colony, it's important to make sure that there's always more females than males in the colony. And this will ensure that they breed rapidly, but also to maximize on the amount of babies that you get. Like I say, I would start with 50 females as a minimum. Obviously, you can do more. For example, if you do 100 females, you'll make sure that there's 30 males in the enclosure with the 100 females. So now we've gone over this, we're now going to move on to setting up the rest of the container. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate all of my roaches now whilst I go over the next bit. Now, setting up their enclosure is fairly straightforward. So to begin with, let's discuss substrate. Now, I will say that you don't have to use substrate if you don't want to. Some people will simply just use paper towels as a substrate, and a lot of people will just simply not use substrate at all. I personally like to provide substrate for 2 reasons. 1, to provide humidity and retain humidity for longer, and 2, to reduce bad smells. Roaches need around 40 to 60% humidity, and by providing this constant humidity level will help increase how quickly they start breeding. But regarding the smell, the substrate basically helps mask the smell. And if you make it bioactive by adding isopods and springtails, they will eat the feces of the roaches and again keep that smell to a minimum. So if you decide to use substrate, I'd recommend either using Repti soil or Arcadia Earth mix, and simply just mix in some desert sand. Like I say, you don't have to use Substrate. This one is kind of just personal preference. I've just always done it. So now that we've covered Substrate, the next thing that I'd recommend getting yourself are these egg crates. Now you have your egg crates, all you simply want to do is place them into the container. But when you place them in, make sure that they're upright, like you can see me doing here, and simply just place one behind the other, like so. Now, egg crates basically work extremely well at providing lots of climbing spaces and hiding spaces for your roaches, but also they are very cheap to replace every so often, so it makes cleaning your roaches out a lot easier. Now, once you've placed your egg crates in, the next thing that you're going to want to think about is temperature and heating. Now, Dubia roaches need between 28 and 35 degrees Celsius, which is 85 to 95 Fahrenheit, in order to breed, but also thrive. So you may find that you naturally will get this temperature range inside the container, but if you realise that you're not providing this temperature, then I'd recommend just getting a small heat mat and simply just stick it to the side of the enclosure. Make sure that you stick it to the side of the enclosure and not underneath the enclosure, otherwise this is going to cause your roaches to sweat and potentially die off. So like I say, stick it onto the side of the enclosure and this will basically help boost the temperature range for your roaches. A lot of the time, if you put them on a shelf high up, they'll naturally get a lot more heat because heat rises. So like I say, this is going to be a bit of trial and error. You want between 28 and 35 degrees Celsius to encourage them to breed rapidly. So the heating will basically just come down to trial and error. So that's pretty much your enclosure fully set up. The next thing that you're going to want to do is actually add your Dubia roaches. So simply just add all of the roaches into the container. Now you have your colony ready to go. However, there is one thing missing, which is food and water source. So let's go over this quickly. So for their diet and to gut load your Dubia roaches to ensure that they thrive and get lots of different vitamins and nutrients, I would recommend feeding them things like carrots, spring greens, collard greens, romaine lettuce, apples, banana, kale, sweet potato, ordinary potato, and even orange. I will say that I've noticed orange seems to work extremely well for breeding large quantities of Dubia roaches, so I'd highly recommend trying orange out with your Dubia roaches. I'd also recommend switching up what you offer to them. Now, roaches need a lot of protein, so for providing protein to your Dubia roaches, I'd recommend feeding them something like fish flakes. And this will basically give them access to all of the protein that they need as and when they want it. Now, for hydration, I wouldn't recommend offering a water bowl because roaches have a tendency to climb in the water bowl and drown themselves. So instead, I'd recommend just giving them some fresh greens to keep them hydrated. Now, some people like to give them these bug balls, and this will also work too. They'll simply just suck all of the water out of these balls. Another thing to note is I'd recommend putting the food onto some kind of tray, and this will basically help prevent the egg crates from going mouldy, but also makes the egg crates last longer before having to replace them. So that's basically everything that you're going to need to know in order to care for your Dubia roaches and ensure that they get a nutritional diet, which in turn, when you feed the roaches off to your pet reptiles, is going to provide your reptiles with a extremely nutritional meal. Like I say, if you give it a few months after setting up this colony, I guarantee you'll start noticing lots of little baby roaches appear. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and also don't forget to follow us on social media. Just simply type in @CoopsReptiles. And yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you've learned something from it. And yeah, I suppose I shall see you in my next video. See ya!